Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. This time out we have the description, finally, for the new Avatar comic, Avatar The Last Airbender, Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy. So obviously this was announced very recently, just a few days ago, but the description wasn't part of the listing that went up. It now is, and here's what it says. For some, perfection just isn't enough. Things are looking bright at the Beifong Metalbending Academy, but after all the adventures Toph's had with Aang, Sokka, Zuko, and Katara, the whole thing feels a bit dull. Luckily, Sokka and Suki come to visit and reintroduce some familiar friends from their wandering days, and while out and about to celebrate, Toph discovers something that just might put the sparkle back in her eye. Once again, release date for this book is going to be February 16th, 2021. And it's by the same creative team as the Katara comic, as well as Imbalance. So Faith Erin Hicks is our writer, and artist is Peter Wortman, colorist is Adele Matera. So this definitely, to me, makes the book seem a lot more interesting. It doesn't confirm the timeline to us necessarily, in that it could still be set like just after the promise. It could be after the search but before the rift. It could be like just after the rift. It could be, like many I suspect and perhaps want, after Imbalance, which could fit with the idea that it does mention Sokka and Suki is sort of back in the story as of Imbalance, and doesn't seem to be locked into the Fire Nation anymore because of that. Or is this going to more tie in with the sort of maybe Shell's timeline, where Sokka and Suki are just like out together, and this maybe takes place at some point after that. So I still want to know that. I wonder will there be any way to figure out from this book where or where not it is set. But anyway, so yeah, the key thing that I think changed it for me is that, okay, Sokka and Suki are in the book, so immediately I was worried that, like, okay, like the Katara book, it's just going to be about Toph. Now knowing that we have another main character plus Suki, who we want to become one of the main characters, so her getting more page count is going to be great to see. Those are going to add a lot of value to this book, seeing them interact, because of course Sokka already knows the three students. Suki came into the promise like after that section of the story, so she probably knows of them but hasn't properly like interacted with the students as such just yet. So that could be interesting, depending on what way they do it. Especially, like, I suppose, just thinking of the dynamics straight away. Penga kind of, like, had a crush on Sokka, then seemingly got over it. But seeing Sokka and Suki together, like, one dynamic that they might straight away go for is just that Penga is sort of jealous of Suki being with Sokka. And she might say something to, like, Suki that makes Suki be like, Sokka, what were you doing with this girl? Or something like that. There could be some like awkward like exchanges there, depending on what exactly they go for. But yeah, the most interesting line of this whole description is they come to visit and reintroduce some familiar faces from their wandering days. That could be like any minor character from the book. Again, I sort of maybe wonder, like, okay, how attached is the sort of last bit of that line to the fact that it's Sokka and Suki? Because if it's specifically including Suki there, Suki only properly joins the team at the end of the Boiling Rock, right towards the end of the series, meaning that she only gets to temporarily meet a lot of the minor characters who are with them, because all the other characters go their separate ways at the start of the Southern Raiders, leaving Suki to join up with the rest of the team for the finale. So like the likes of Hakoda, Chitsang, Teo, the Duke, Haru, they go with Hakoda. So Suki has met those characters, sort of like off screen basically. So she would know of them and be familiar with, you know, reintroducing them. But is it specific to Suki, or could it be characters who maybe only Toph and Sokka have met? Maybe Toph hasn't met before, but Sokka has. So that's why, like, it really is open to almost anyone. And I suppose this potentially could include like freedom fighters. So I suppose Smellerby and Longshot would perhaps be the ones I'd be thinking of reintroducing, because they were in the promise, but then we haven't seen them since, and I think people would like to see them return, because Smellershot is like sort of a relationship that we're like, they are a thing, aren't they? They are a couple, kind of, maybe. I think people really want them to be. I'd like to see that maybe get confirmed if it happens to be them. But I think Haru might be a good shout, just because he is an earthbender, and I could see some value in him wanting to see the academy. And because like you have moments like Haru, like was it Toph mentions to like Katara at one point, I think it's in the finale, the first episode of the finale, you did have a thing with Haru, so her actually meeting Haru again might be an interesting thing, because obviously again they were in the scenes together, but we don't know what their dynamic is. So him seeing her academy as an earthbender could be a thing. He might want to test if he himself could be a metalbender. It's something. The Duke is an option because it actually seems like he's relatively close to Toph, in that a few of the scenes they have here, as well as in some of the Lost Adventures comics, show them actually being pretty good as a team, and that like he's one of the few characters that Toph lets sort of touch her feet, which for her is like a really, really big thing. Again, that's maybe going a bit too much down the Toph shipper side of me, of like, you know, there's where I'm planting my flag in terms of like Toph and relationships is Toph and the Duke. So him coming back into things would be kind of interesting, just to add a little bit of a kind of romance style thing into this book. But yeah, I don't think there's really any obvious way to figure out who it could be outside of just, you know, throwing every minor character possible into the hat here and just who would fit. Chit Sang, I think, is a great character who I would love to see come back into things, just to get a little bit of an explanation for, like, you know, what exactly happened to him at the end of the series and so on. But you kind of wonder how would they come into contact with him again. Even just referring to it as, like, their wandering days, that's what they call, like, just their time together as a team, trying to save the world. And then the last bit of the description, and while out and about to celebrate, Toph discovers something that might put the sparkle back in her eye. So what could this be? Out celebrating. So, you know, there's an interesting dynamic here of like, it's feeling a bit dull for Toph, but she goes out to celebrate, I suppose, with Sokka and Suki and whoever the minor characters they're including are. And she notices something, not someone, but something that might bring excitement back into things. What is that? What could that be? Initially I was thinking like, oh, might she find another student of note this time out? Because of course she's going to have, I suppose, the meteorite bracelet to sense anyone that it possibly could be. But it says something. Obviously the main thing I think most people would like this comic to maybe touch on to a degree is her maybe transitioning the academy from just being a straight up metalbending school to being more of a kind of police officer training thing. I still think it's very early to have that happen, because Toph, as much as Imbalance showed her being a little bit more of a investigator type character, and she's getting more involved in like the security of like Cranefish Town, Earth and Fire Industries, whatever way you want to refer to it, she still feels a very long way away from actually being like a police officer herself. Like I assume she would have to have training to know the police rules side of things. So where does she get her training from? The only other thing I can think of is that like maybe she discovers a new way to add something to metal bending, which is the metal kind of whips that they have, the spools of metal rope. This might be where that comes out into play. She just notices something that looks familiar and she's like, oh, that's a cool way to do metal bending. I don't know if that necessarily would be like something big enough to just be like, it makes Toph's life like more interesting again and removes some of the dullness in comparison to her journeys with the team. I don't know. I think the description is kind of interesting in that there's at least two things here that make me want to be like, okay, I want to read this book just to figure out what those two things are. But at the same time, if it's like if it's the introduction of some minor characters who maybe aren't the most interesting minor characters, and then the something isn't that interesting, the book still might not be that great. But the fact that Sokka and Suki are in this book to me adds a lot, and I think this could actually turn out pretty well. I still maintain that I wish we had a better explanation for like why they've decided to switch up and seemingly devote like an entire year of Avatar comics to one-shot books while not continuing on the main story. That's the big, I think, problem in all of this, that we still don't know what's going on with Korra comics. But now that we have the description, it definitely feels a little bit better. I think that this is the direction they're going in, that they're not so locked into if you have one main character on the front, that's the only character that the book can be about. I do wonder though, can they only put like the 5 main characters on the cover? Katara, Toph, Aang, Zuko, Sokka. Are they the only sort of possible candidates for like the main character of the story to be? Because I think people would find so much value if they were able to do like Avatar Last Airbender, Iroh something or other, and it maybe involves a little bit of his backstory. The option that I said on the podcast earlier on that I thought was actually a reasonably good idea is, what if the Zuko story is more about it's set post imbalance, but it's more about the sort of nicer parts of his life. So it's not about Azula, but it's the other stuff that we want to go back to the Fire Nation for. So his relationship with Mai, finding out the stuff about Ki being a firebender, revealing that to everyone. More dynamic with Ursa, Noren could be in it as well, and just clarifying stuff before we potentially then finally get the Azula story in a bigger series down the line. I think that's one way to do it. Like, use the third one if you want to do something different, and have it be Zuko, but set in the right time period, and get a lot of the sort of other plot points out of the way. So Azula can be the focus when her story comes out. Azula herself potentially is an option to maybe give a bit of backstory to further clarify her, but I don't know if they're willing to do that. So I don't know. I'd like to see the last one feel a little bit more important, but I'm not sure. At this point, we're pretty sure the next Avatar comic by Faith Erin Hicks and Peter Wortman will be another one-shot book, because they have to collect them at some point into a hardback, and they're only going to do that once they have at least 3. So that's why I'm speculating about a third one-shot book. But yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are in the description to this book. I suppose the main thing to discuss here is just, who are these familiar faces from their Wandering days? Like, what minor characters are they bringing back here? And then also, is there anything to go on for the last bit of the description? What will Toph discover that will bring excitement back into her life? It's thought-provoking, for sure. So, they're my thoughts. In the comments, let me know your thoughts. That's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.